Well, Jim Wallace, thank you so much for being willing to take some time with Riverwood,
Yeah.
which is awesome. So first question off is, in your book, you say that at age 35, you were an angry atheist, a skeptic that routinely dissected Christians and Christian worldview. Tell me about that. And how did you end up finding Christ?
A friend of ours had been asking us to go to church. So we stepped foot for the first time. I'm 35 years old, and we're in a evangelical church, a huge mega church here in Orange County. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, it was to me, it was crazy. I'd never seen worship. It seemed to be a little bit over the top, lot loud, crowded, probably about 3,000 people there that day in that service. But the pastor was able to throw Jesus in a way that I could at least catch him for a short time. I could at least catch this version he pitched. He said a lot of things, but one of the things he said that stuck out in my mind was that Jesus was the smartest guy who ever lived. He didn't say it exactly like that, but that's basically his point. And he said all of Western culture has been built on the teaching of Jesus. You might want to, here I am as a police officer enforcing the very laws that he alleged were developed and informed by Jesus. So maybe you should know what Jesus has to say. And that's what got me interested in reading the works of Jesus.
So I imagine you've been a witness in many, many court cases. So let's just sort of hypothesize here for a minute. A lawyer comes to you, says, Detective Wallace, please summarize for the court the evidence in this 2,000-year-old cold case that would convict Jesus of existing. How would you convict Jesus of existing? What evidence how would you summarize that evidence?
Well, I can tell you that I typically will resist an effort to summarize the case briefly. I'll tell you why. I think that the case is, like all of my cases, are cumulative, circumstantial cases. What makes a cumulative case work is, I call it death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It is this idea that it's not one single piece of evidence that makes the case in any of my cases. It's the cumulative 100 pieces of evidence that all point to the same reasonable inference. If Jesus was the kind of character from the past who never worked a miracle, and we had an account of this character, the number of accounts we have today, the way it was transmitted through time, there wouldn't be a single scholar in all of history who would doubt the historicity of Jesus. What causes the doubt related to the historicity of Jesus are the insertion of the miracle accounts. If Jesus was just a wise sage who never worked a miracle, never healed anybody, never rose from the dead, but had a lot of nice things to say, nobody would doubt his historicity.
Now, Richard Carrier, you're familiar with his work on the historicity of Jesus, why we have reason to doubt. Bart Ehrman, how Jesus came about. David Fitzgerald nailed the 10 myths of Jesus. These people would say that he didn't exist. So if you had a chance to cross-examine those folks, what would be some of your points?
Well, I can tell you that I know Carrier and I know David, and Richard and David have worked with us on our student groups, and we lead them into Berkeley. Both of those atheists come to our student groups and they spend time with our students. This is why I'm so glad that at Riverwood you guys are doing this, because you are taking the time to do what we did. We're preparing our young people. We take them to Berkeley, and Richard and David would be the two people we would bring in to make the case. So I think it's important to understand, young people, anyone who's listening to this, that don't be surprised that there's an articulate, well-versed defense attorney who's willing to make a case against you. I've never worked a case where I spent 6 weeks, right? And then I presented the case, and at the end of it, the defense attorney says, wow, that was so good, we're done. We can't say anything. No, they now spend 6 weeks making the alternative case. And I've had these happen where after 6 weeks on both sides, the defendant actually confessed. So clearly, the defense story is not true, yet it was very articulate. Persuasive, not persuasive enough, but I mean, all the things you would expect from a defense attorney. The fact that somebody can articulate a different position does not make the position true. People ask me, where are you most successful in your trials? Is it at the opening statement? No. Is it at the evidence show? No. Is it at the closing argument? No. Is it at jury deliberation? No. We win or lose trials at jury selection. Now, I know that sounds disappointing. But the truth is, if you don't put the right jury in the box, you can't win either side. So both sides make a concerted effort during voir dire to pick a jury that both sides think they can win with. Now, it's equal battle back and forth. Each can exempt 26 people, and we often go pretty deep in that list to pick from a larger pool, the 12 that'll sit in the box, the 4 alternates, those 16 people We pick from the larger pool. Right, and the bias continuum is people who are for the prosecution or for the defense, and then you have two on the prosecution side, people who are so in the bucket for the prosecution, they'll never do anything but vote for the prosecution, and people who are fair, but lean toward the prosecution. People who are fair but lean toward the defense, and people who are so in the bucket for the defense, they will never go with the prosecution. Now, the same thing is true for those of us who are sharing with our friends. You have Christians and non-Christians, and they break into two groups. Christians who are so committed in their Christianity, you could drag the dead body of Jesus in front of them, they wouldn't care. They're going to stay Christians. They believe it's good for them. They're happy with it. Then you have people who are fair. They're having doubts, actually. They have open questions about Christianity, but they would still call themselves Christians. Non-believers who have open doubts, but would still call themselves non-believers, and people who are such adamant atheists that they are actually anti-theists. I want to help Christians in the number one box know that even though you're committed, you probably have a young person in your life who's in box number two. You need to know how to make the case for the guy in box number two, who's probably your son or daughter. Now, if you're number two, I want to speak to you because you have open questions. I want to help you. If you're number three, you have open questions. I want to help you. But if you're number four, where you just hate the idea so much that no matter what I say, you're going to flip me off and push back, I am not going to take the same approach with you that I would with the first three category. I call this the three-quarter principle. I spend time with the first three. I pray and model Christ for number four.
That's fascinating. I think we're learning that early in our series now that I always thought it was if you stacked up enough evidence on one side or on the other that it was going to be convincing and self-evident. But
Right.
there's so much heart involved. There's so much relationship involved.
Yes.
There's so much bias involved, and we have our biases, and they have. So it's fascinating. One last question: do Christians know the evidence, or how important is it to study this apologetic stuff?
I wish they did. I ask this question a lot, and I put this in the next book. I ask the question, why are you guys Christians? And I get the same three answers everywhere I go, and here they are. I'm a Christian because I was raised that way. That's the number one answer. I'm a Christian because I've had some experience that confirmed for me that God is real. That is the number two answer. I'm a Christian because I used to be a jerk. I met Jesus. I'm not so much a jerk anymore. Okay, that's kind of experiential also, so that's kind of the third category. Those are the top three answers. And that's also, by the way, probably the same thing the Buddhist would say, or any other believer would say, of any worldview. So I think our answers need to be different. So it's time for us to take our role. If you've been a Christian, but you haven't been a Christian case maker, well, in 1 Peter 3, then you have a partial Christian life. You've had a truncated, abbreviated Christian existence because we're all called to be Christian case makers. So if you've been a Christian, great. If you're not a Christian case maker, now's the time.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jim. Thanks for your time today. You're so generous and being willing to share with us and teach us, and it's been really rich.
I really appreciate your time with that. Now, I'll tell you this: your church. I don't need to brag on you, but it's not very often that a church gets it. So all of you who are in this church, you are very lucky to be in the right place to take the next step in your journey.
God bless you. Thanks so much.